Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage David Gaspari, Vice President for Enterprise and Government, Optus Business.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody who is here today in beautiful Melbourne at the Innovation Theatre, and also to everyone who is live streaming this session from all across Asia Pacific. I'm really excited and proud to be able to talk to all of you for about the next 40 minutes around how we're seeing the enterprise being reimagined. But we're also very proud of our more than 20-year partnership that we've had with Cisco. And you see, obviously, we are the diamond sponsor for this event, as we have been for a number of years. And we are very humbled to have been the recipient of both the Australian-New Zealand Service Provider Partner of the Year, but also the Asia Pacific and Japan Service Provider Partner of the Year. But that's the last I'm going to talk about our credentials, because that's not what this session is about today. And my objective today is to really pose some questions, challenge some of your assumptions, and maybe leave you with some thoughts about how, as you go back into your enterprise organisations or government, you might think differently about how to drive and regain and gain competitive differentiation and advantage. But before you do, I just want to ask people to put their hands up. How many people here have kids? Wow, great. How many people have teenage children? All right, I've got two kids. I've got a 13-year-old boy and a 15-year-old boy. And outside my day job of leading enterprise and government, I actually spend a lot of time thinking about the future of work, the future of education, and the world that my children and our young boys and girls are going to be going into, which is going to be a very fundamentally different future of work. And I want to leave that thought with you, because some of the things that we're going to go through over the next half hour are going to challenge our assumptions of the world that they need to prepare for, and whether we as Australia indeed are prepared for that future as it comes today. So there's a thought for you as we get into it. I did, though, have a chance about 6 weeks ago to talk to about 2,000 amazing young men and women who are doing their HSC or about to do the HSC. And I reflected back on when I was their age, which was 1989. You can work out my age if you want to do that calculation. At a time where the most advanced handheld technology was the Nintendo Game Boy. And I know most of us, I'm looking at the demographic here, unfortunately, will remember the Game Boy. The handheld phone, we're going to be talking about 5G today. It was very definitely not 5G. It was barely 1G, and it was $4,300 in today's currency. And the Billboard World #1 song was In Excess's Need You Tonight, which I still think is one of the great songs. So, you know, some things change, some things I think should stay the same. But the reason I say that is because if you think about that world and the world that 18 and 19-year-olds are coming into today, the technology has fundamentally changed the way they engage, the way we engage, the way we socialise, the way we communicate, the way we entertain ourselves, the way we interact with colleagues. And I would argue that there's been more change in the last 50 years as a result of the third industrial revolution than the change in the millennia before that. And it's been driven not just by technology, it's been driven by social changes such as urbanisation, the rise of the millennial, female participation in the workforce. But technology has fundamentally disrupted the way we engage. And my argument, and our argument is, while industrial revolutions are not new, whether it be the first industrial revolution, whether it be the second when we saw mass production, and the digital revolution that came along in 1969, the fourth industrial revolution is going to accelerate change like we've never seen before. And we're already in it. You know, the likes of Facebook, the likes of Instagram, if you go to China and you see what Tencent are doing, you see what WeChat's doing, see what DiDi's doing. They're the leaders in the adoption of the fourth industrial revolution. And the fourth industrial revolution is enabled by technologies such as artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, pervasive connectivity, APIs, and the mass use of data. And the reality is every industry, every single industry has been disrupted or is in the process of being disrupted. And the telecommunications industry, our industry, is not immune to those changes either. The next 10 years, though, are going to move that change into exponential territory. And futurists can talk to a lot of different data points about artificial and augmented reality, virtual reality, text by thinking. I'm sure a number of people here went to Mobile World Congress or heard some of the feedback from Mobile World Congress and some of what the future thinking is over the next 5 years. I'd argue, by the way, that the single most disruptive technology for the next 5 to 10 years is artificial intelligence. It is being adopted in almost all parts of our life, and there is no doubt that humans at this particular stage have no chance at beating machines in highly repetitive tasks. AI is not a new field. It was invented by MIT in the 1950s. But what's happened in the last 5 years is machine learning is fundamentally supercharged by massive amounts of data and mass compute. And that's what's really driven the resurgence of artificial intelligence today. But I'm not a believer, just to be clear, that artificial intelligence is going to change things over the next 1, 2, or even 5 years. If you take a look at the realities of how slowly enterprise and government in Australia have adopted new technologies and how far consumer tech and consumer experience is ahead of enterprise and government technology, I think it's going to be a slower burn than a lot of people think, but I think it's going to be the single most disruptive shift. But that said, with these exponential changes, with a world that is going to have 50 billion devices, many of those mechanical devices and not human devices, in a world where 11 years ago the App Store was open and was started and it had 500 apps, and we're going to a world where by next year there'll be 25 million apps between Google Play and the App Store, where global online purchasing is exponentially increasing. We have to acknowledge that we either have to disrupt ourselves or we have to expect that we are going to be disrupted. And so over the course of the next 20 minutes or so, I want to put on the table this simple point of view. In the face of the market disruptions and the acceleration of those disruptions enabled by the technologies underpinned by the fourth industrial revolution, such as artificial intelligence, I would argue that the single most important point of differentiation for an organisation is total obsession on customer experience. I would also say that talent in this environment, whether it's sourced inside your organisation or from the gig economy, or in a much more pervasive way, is going to be the anchor for differentiation. If you can't attract, retain, drive innovation and activate that talent, you're not going to be able to drive customer experience. In order to do that, you have to digitise everything from end to end. And you need to make the whole experience mobile, because no one wants to work on a fixed line anymore. Everyone wants to use their device anywhere, at any time, in any format. You need to redesign your organisation for agility and speed. And in a digital world, cybersecurity is foundational. You can simply not make these transformations without cyber across your entire organisation. Now let me start and talk about customer experience, because as I said, we think customer experience is the single biggest differentiation. And I'm not quite this old, if you did my maths, but I'm not that far off, to be completely honest. But I just want to give you an analogy, a bit of a story. My mum and dad, they run a small business, they still do. And they ran that business and ran that business in an era of a local bank branch with a local bank manager. And that bank manager knew my parents, they knew the name of the business, they knew the name of me, they knew what we were interested in, they understood a lot about us. They knew the name of our dog, I imagine. It was a visceral relationship. It was deeply human. It was deeply personal. And that's what underpinned the loyalty that we had to our banking relationship. Now, those branches have gone, and you know what? They're never going to come back. And I'd argue that the third industrial revolution, the digital revolution, might have digitized customer experience, but it massively depersonalized customer experience. And I think the opportunity now, anchored on the fourth industrial revolution, is to not rehumanize it, because we're not going to get the branches, but to take the technologies and repersonalize the experience we feel. And this is, I think, the thing. If you look at what Facebook and what those organisations have done, they've worked out a way to take massive data, artificial intelligence, and create a very obsessive focus on a personal experience. And the journey and the customer experience needs to be as frictionless as possible. And if I want to leave you with a term as an executive going back into your organisation, I want to leave you with the term friction. Because I think if you look at the lens of your business and say, I want a friction-free experience, it is going to change the way you think about all of the different components. Because all of us have experienced totally shitty customer experiences. You know, you go online, to your bank, you're trying to find a savings account. You go to the website, then you can't find the interest rate because it's actually on a different part of the website. Then you want to find the terms and conditions. There's a PDF that you have to find on a different part of the website. Okay, you now want to apply. So they say you can do it online. You click and it says, that's fine, somebody will be in touch with you at some point in the next millennia. And then they don't get in touch with you, and then you have to call the call centre, and they can't find your application form. You do have the reference number. They can't find the application form. So they kindly put you up to another call centre because those guys can't help you with that. And finally, you hang up on them and say, stuff this, I'm going to try and find something else. We've all had that, right? We've all had it in so many different ways. That is a customer experience that is pervasive. And the outcome of a focus on digitisation, a focus on operational efficiency, and a total defocus on what it feels like to create a personal human relationship connection with your customer. And so I would argue that if you go back to your organisation and say, am I providing my customer a frictionless experience? You will look at your business in an entirely different way. The anchor of a frictionless experience is identity. The thing about the bank manager and that bank manageriality is they knew me, they knew my parents, they had an understanding of our identity. And if you can get identity right, the rest of the technologies exist already. And I'd argue right now that there's nothing to stop any organisation truly driving differentiated customer experiences outcomes. I would also argue that the mantra of CEOs and boards today saying they're putting customer experience first is not reflected when you go down and you talk to the operational teams and the management and all of the things that are being done on the ground. And finally, I'd argue that the reason that all these technologies, even though they can enable the customer experience, aren't delivering it is because people are thinking technology up as opposed to customer experience down and working out how to use the technology to enable the experience and the frictionless journey that you want to define first. And so this is what we spend time doing with a lot of our customers. And it's part of my role is to talk to organisations who are grappling with disruption, with over-the-top players coming and disintermediating their business. And they're saying, what do we do? And I'm saying, well, let's not talk about the technology. Let's work out what you want that experience to look like. Do you have a customer experience designer? Have you worked through personas? Once we've done that, let's talk about the technology and the technology adoption. And amongst others, we're really proud of what we've been doing recently down here in Victoria with Southwest TAFE. Now, the TAFE sector is a really interesting sector right now, and as I said, I'm incredibly passionate about education. I think the TAFE sector has lost its way over the course of the last decade. It no longer caters anymore for people that are coming out of school. No one goes from a school certificate because it doesn't exist anymore in the TAFE sector, and they've lost sort of their mission. But Southwestern TAFE has actually realised that with the aggressive change in the shape of the workforce, there is an opportunity for fast reskilling that is now needed as certain jobs are eliminated through artificial intelligence, new jobs are created, and people don't have the patience to do a 4-year master's degree to do it. There is a sweet spot for TAFE, and Southwest TAFE has worked out that they need to lead in the reskilling economy. But they also realised that to do that, they had to engage in a very different way to the way the last generation of TAFE students engaged, in where they were coming and they were doing potentially trades and other things like that. People need a 3-month or a 6-month cybersecurity upgrade. They need to learn about APIs. They need to do it in 3 to 6 months. And those people, by the way, do not want to engage in the classroom all the time. They do not want to have to pick up the phone to find out when their next session or lecture is. They prefer to interact on web chat. They prefer to interact digitally. And so Southwest TAFE said, listen, what we want is we want to create a citizen experience that starts with the first time one of our potential students becomes aware of Southwest TAFE to the point at which they're an alumni. And that meant creating a porous border, and it meant extending the classroom out of the physical into the virtual and creating an identity that went end to end. And the technologies that we implemented to get that outcome were secondary to making sure that we understood the objective that Southwest TAFE had in their strategy. But yes, we implemented collaboration technologies in very strong partnership with Cisco, identity technologies in collaboration with Cisco, and many other technologies that enabled dimensions of a very, very different student experience. Now, I want to shift gears to employee experience. And I'd argue that it's actually harder now to attract certain scarce talent in the marketplace than it ever has before. And I want to talk briefly about the gig economy. Everyone here know what the gig economy is? Yes? No? Okay, well, let me ask you this, a trivia question. Anyone know who invented the term gig economy? Any guesses? No one? All right. People think, okay, gig is gigabyte, gigabit. You know who invented the gig economy? Rolling Stone magazine, because the first giggers were musicians. The gig economy is the freelance economy. And the musicians had a gig, on Friday night from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. And then they had to work out what they were going to do the rest of their week to actually earn some money so they can do the gig the next week. They were the first giggers. But we're now working in a world where the World Economic Forum would argue that by 2030, only 9% of people will actually be employed, like I am, by Optus in a contract. The rest of them will be working in a freelance world where they'll be competing in a global marketplace for roles that might be a year, a month, a week, or an hour. When we ran the Commonwealth Games, the digital fabric from the Commonwealth Games in the Gold Coast last year, we had to source a particular cybersecurity resource from Germany for 4 hours, and the talent could not be sourced in this country. Do you know in the gig economy what the highest paid gig economy job is right now. Most of you may not have even heard of TensorFlow as a coding language, but it is the coding language that is the preferred underpinning for artificial intelligence. And for those of us who have kids, underpins the Fortnite engine, which is the bane of mine and my family's existence right now. But TensorFlow engineers can't be hired by the likes of Optus because they compete in the global economy, and they're earning $290 an hour. So think about that. That's about $340,000 a year if they choose to work 3 days a week in a freelance economy. But the reason I'm telling that story is now we're working in a world where when we talk about employee experience, we're not talking about a world of contracted employees that come to the office that are actually on an Optus contract. We're talking about a porous employee ecosystem. We're working with, we had to work with a couple of the big law firms about 12 months ago. And they came to us and they said, we've got a problem. This Royal Commission that's going on into financial services, we need to bring another 300 lawyers on. And by the way, we can't afford it to take 4 weeks. And by the way, we need them to have certain security clearances from day one. Access to these documents, access to those. We need to be able to source them from India. We need to be able to source them from the UK because there's simply not enough talent in this country. So when you start to think about employee experience, you're not talking about, hey, what does it feel like to go to the office and be sitting at the desk? You're thinking about an ecosystem of people that activate your brand, where you're trying to attract talent maybe for an hour, for a week, a month, or a year, where you have to make them productive incredibly fast, where you have to work in a world where under the new cybersecurity rules, mandatory disclosure has raised the threshold, but people need access to information immediately. It has become exponentially more complex to create that employee experience. But it's also, if you get it right, is the way you'll untether your business and the way you will go from a place of historic confines and constraints to a world where you can move with agility, where you can bring 300 people on in 4 days, for a week, and then get them out. Where you can bring a TensorFlow engineer into your organization that has access to the information that they need in order to code for 4 hours in a way that's secure, where the boundaries are there, they're porous, but the security is there. And I guarantee you, email's not the way to do that. Most of the organizations that are trying to do this are trying to do it with technology and workflows that are 30 years old. Email was crap 20 years ago. It's got worse. And you know, we all have it. I mean, how many emails that we copied on, you know, that we don't even know what to do with? Reply all, reply all, reply all. We file them. We don't read them. There's no workflow. It doesn't create an environment where you're trying to work in potentially a small group to solve a problem with agility. Face-to-face or video is 34 times more effective, but we still send that bloody email to that person that's on the other side of the floor and expect that to be a productive way of getting a job done. Let's be real. We need to reimagine the way we engage. And you know, the technologies that Cisco have been building over the last few years have moved eons from where they were 5 or 10 years ago. I'd also argue, once again, it's actually not about the technology. We've rolled out WebEx to our entire sales force, and we use it very actively in the way we engage, in the way we form teams, in the way we disband teams around challenges and issues. And I'll tell you, just rolling out WebEx doesn't mean anyone's going to adopt it. You actually need to change your workflows fundamentally and change the way you build agile teams. And usually, to get that change, you actually have to have a purpose and a mission. We got it right when we said we're going to do the Commonwealth Games anchored in WebEx WebEx spaces and a collaborative environment, not when we just roll the environment out. But I would argue that the biggest unlock for your organisation is to think about how you use collaboration to unconstrain the talent that you've got in an organisation, to make the technology and the engagement fun, to make it mobile, because nobody wants to be anchored into a laptop. They want to be anchored onto a device that makes sense where they are for what they're doing at any point, at any time. And finally, I do want to talk about spaces and things, because we talk about a virtual world where everything is done digitally, and artificial intelligence and all of those other things play a role. But people still need to gather. Teams still work very well when you can find a way to blend the physical and the virtual in a way that actually creates a very compelling outcome. And we're doing a lot of work right now in and around reimagining physical and virtual spaces, trying to make those boundaries porous. And the one I'm the most excited about, actually a national finalist this year in the Innovation Awards for the AIIA, is the Royal Botanical Gardens, and the work we did there. The Royal Botanical Gardens is a very, very old institution, and they're grappling with their identity in the future. You know, their biggest competition? Again, it's Fortnite. They are competing for people's entertainment time. It's as simple as that. And so as they think about their role in the future, they have to think about how they attract people to an experience in the botanical gardens and not Fortnite. And so they came to us and they said, you know what? We have to rethink what we are. We are still thinking about this the same way we did 50 years ago. We have a great space, we curate wonderful parklands, we've got incredible knowledge, but no one's coming. People are actually, numbers are dwindling, people don't seem to be interested. And so they set themselves a challenge to be the most digital, connected garden space in the world. And we did some things there with the botanical gardens that haven't been done anywhere at any time, including smart city technology, loading up smart cells, putting Wi-Fi through the whole organisation, and then enabling this wonderful augmented reality capability. And I remember back about 3 months ago when all of this was released, my 12-year-old was tasked with arranging an itinerary for us for 3 hours. And so he had the app, he'd worked out the trip, he'd worked out the tour, he'd worked out where he was going. He puts the phone in front of some flora or fauna, up comes the details of it. A pop-up then comes up and says, hey, you know what, there's a clown over there coming in about 45 minutes. The experience excited him, it energized him. He then got on Instagram, took photos, he told, his X100 mates. It went viral, other people started coming. They're thinking differently about the future, and I would challenge all of you to think about who your competition is and work out whether you need to reframe your competition in order to ask yourself the challenging questions that will allow you to differentiate. They focused on the visitor experience. But Spaces and Things is also about how the acceleration of the Internet of Things is fundamentally changing the way businesses operate. We do a lot of work, particularly in West Australia, with some of the resource organisations and the mines, where we built 4G private networks that enable autonomous vehicles, enable sensors, that provide security, that allow them to run large-scale operations efficiently, and focus on safety, because safety is the #1 priority in the resources sector. And we're learning an enormous amount about in and around IoT as a result of the innovation and the incubation we're doing over there. Now, here's the reality. We have no idea what 2030 is going to look like in terms of the technologies that are going to be developed, the adoption, whether blockchain is going to truly disrupt everything or indeed have very limited purposes, etc. Nor do you. But in terms of our responsibility as a network provider, an ICT network provider, our job is to make sure that irrespective of what those technologies are, you don't need to worry about them. Because our job is to make sure that we're implementing those capabilities. And the things that we're focused on right now in our network, in the $2+ billion we spend a year, are in the areas of the application of artificial intelligence, the applications of different types of hybrid cloud environments, how you look at digitalisation end-to-end, both in the way we digitise ourselves, but in the way we translate that into how we help you digitise your businesses, and obviously what's going on with 5G. And 5G is probably, with artificial intelligence, with APIs, is probably one of the biggest disruptors for the next decade. I really encourage you to go and listen to Kent. When is Kent speaking? Tomorrow? Afternoon, 3:30. Kent will be here tomorrow afternoon at 3:30. And Kent is one of the people that are leading the architecture of Optus's 5G network. So a really good opportunity to get a practitioner's real view of what's going on. Here's what I will tell you. People associate 5G with mass speed. And it will be faster. It will take you from 50 to 100 megabits a second, potentially up to 2 gigabits a second. But actually, it's not the speed that's going to make the difference with the adoption of 5G. It's actually a few other things. It's latency. It's resilience. It's the ability to create virtual private 5G networks and slice. Why are these important? Why is latency important? Well, let me give you an easy example. The latency of 4G is about 50 milliseconds, and I assume people know what latency is. It's delay. The latency of 5G is about 5 milliseconds. Why is that important? Let me give you an example of virtual reality. Your eyes can sense at 20 milliseconds. With 4G at 50 milliseconds, if you put VR glasses on and you move your eyes like this, the screen will lag over 4G technology, and it gives you vertigo, it makes you nauseous. And that's why you can't actually roll out full virtual reality on 4G. The moment 5G comes out, with 5 millisecond enables the ability to roll out, scale, commercial applications of virtual reality. It's also about resilience. You can't roll out drone tech and autonomous vehicles without the resilience and the edge compute that is part of the 5G ecosystem and architecture. So I do encourage you to talk to Kent. It is a very interesting area right now, and I think you need to think as organisations, unlike 4G, which was really application-led for the consumer, 5G is going to be led by the enterprise with use cases, whether it's in healthcare, for robotic surgery, whether it's in the application in agriculture to use drone technology for safety and various other things. An area that you really should get a handle on. And as I start to wrap up, I reflect on how we look at this market. In an environment that is moving so quickly, where innovation is happening at such a pace, we recognise that we can't do this alone. And so that's why we partner very deeply with the likes of scale technology leaders such as Cisco. It's also why we've engaged in a 5-year, $10 million relationship with Macquarie University to build the leading cybersecurity hub in Australia. It's why we've just entered into a partnership with Curtin University in West Australia $10 million again over 5 years to look at research and applications of artificial intelligence, particularly in agriculture, education, and the application back on Optus and telecommunications technology. It's why we're the largest partner and supporter of the startup and incubator ecosystem in this country. And we are the foundation partner of Sydney Startup Hub, 11 floors and 2,000 organisations that are starting up, particularly in areas like fintech and agri-tech. And for you, we know you can't do it alone either. And so, you know, as I sort of wrap this up, we fundamentally believe that we're seeing an acceleration like we've never seen before in the way disruption is occurring, particularly enabled by the fourth industrial revolution. We fundamentally believe that customer experience is the only anchor for long-term strategic differentiation. We fundamentally believe that you need to think differently about a porous and agile employee experience. In order to do that, you need to retool the way your organisation runs, you need to digitise end-to-end, and you need to be secured by cybersecurity. Our offer to you is our partnership, our ecosystem, and our experiences, and we'd love to be part of your journey. And as I finish off, I will play what I hope you saw at the keynote today, but we're also thinking about how we communicate to the market, and we are now talking about how you can reimagine enterprise with us. So on that point, I'd like to play the video, and thank you very much.
Technology is transforming so fast. If you're not adapting, it can hold your business down. But we can set you free. Optus believes in connecting business with digital solutions that reimagine what we're humanly capable of. Unlocking possibilities that enable you to securely work without limits. Harnessing technology that energizes and empowers us all. Seamlessly making the complex simpler and the dull brighter. Digital collaboration for a reimagined tomorrow. Giving you solutions that advance the agility, connectivity, and freedom of your business. Just as it should be.